Number 10. Undead Brother Voodoo. This version of Brother Voodoo hails from Earth 666, ooh spooky, where he is part of the Undead Avengers team. While still technically a hero, he's also still technically a monster. The Avengers of Earth 666 are all considered members of the Undead, with each of them technically being some kind of monster, some version of undead, if you will. Jericho Drum in this universe appears to be some kind of poltergeist-like ghost from his appearance here. I don't know if he's specifically a poltergeist, I just think of him that way because of his glowiness. I don't know, reminds me of the movie Poltergeist. This team, including the ghostly Brother Voodoo, make their first appearance in issue number 33 of the Secret Avengers series, where they tangle with Secret Avengers members Captain Britain and Clint Barton's Hawkeye of Earth 616.
Number 9. Groot. Before he was the mainstay lovable space ent in Guardians of the Galaxy with a raccoon-shaped compatriot, Groot was actually an evil, monstrous tree. He first appeared in Tales to Astonish number 13 in 1960. The tagline in the comic itself was, quote, "Where Groot walks, death follows." He was also entirely obscure before being thrust into the pop culture fandom when Marvel decided to turn their C-list team, Guardians of the Galaxy, into a phenomenally massive success. He was originally a throwaway monster, and his original comic, before 2012, was worth $2,868, which isn't small by any means, but after the movies premiered, it was worth $19,000. In the comic, Groot belongs to a species called Floral Colossus, although they're also just called Groots too. During his early life, the Floral Colossi rule over Planet X, and Groot was an outcast amongst his people. He became friends with the inferior species called the Undergrowth, a fungi-like species also on the planet. Groot is eventually forced to flee his homeworld after he kills another Colossus while defending an Undergrowth. Before the movies, Groot also appeared in 2 other comics, one being The Incredible Hulk, where he more so resembles his original appearance rather than the huggable tree we know today. The Hulk comic released in 1976, and then lastly he was in Annihilation Conquest number 6 in 2008. It was the first appearance of Groot as his modern rendition, smaller, skinnier, a bit more approachable than the Godzilla-style tree we knew before. He also joined the Guardians of the Galaxy lineup in this comic alongside Star-Lord, Drax the Destroyer, and Rocket Raccoon.
Number 8. Ultimate Hulk. Let's be real, when I think of multiversal monster versions of the Hulk, I often think of Ultimate Hulk of Earth 1610, aka the Ultimate Universe. Here Hulk was less a hero and more just, kind of a brute. In fact, at one point the Ultimates, who are basically this Earth's version of the Avengers, even had to fight against, not with the Hulk. The Hulk would eventually go on to join the Ultimates team, I'll give him that, but let's not forget that he's a cannibalistic beast who also makes some of the most violent threats when he's angry. Even Bruce Banner wasn't as altruistic in this universe, initially hoping to create the next super soldier serum so that he might be able to increase his own strength and power. However, instead he created a Hulk serum, which turned him into the Hulk because he was all about testing that serum on himself. It's even implied that during his first transformation that he may have actually caused the death of Mary and Richard Parker, the parents of Spider-Man. Peter Parker, so yeah.
Number 7. Marvel Zombies. It's an entire pantheon of characters, from Spider-Man to Hulk to Captain America, but all zombified. The zombie versions of beloved heroes were first introduced in the pages of Ultimate Fantastic Four and became instant hits. In typical Marvel marketing genius, Marvel spun the zombies into their own book written by none other than Robert Kirkman. Robert Kirkman is the same bearded guy behind a television show you might know called The Walking Dead. The comics ran from December 2005 to April 2006. It starts in an alternate Earth called Earth 2149, where an unknown hero crash lands from another dimension. He comes with a, quote, hunger, which infects the Avengers, the X-Men, and the Fantastic Four, along with basically every other major superhero you can think of. It's intense, and the adventures of the zombie heroes usually have more mayhem than most mainstream comics do in their entire run. It's all about damage and impact, and oh boy does Kirkman deliver on that. Peter Parker eats Aunt May. I'm serious, look it up. After an episode of the Disney Plus series called What If Zombies, there were talks of Disney also creating a spin-off series based on and named after the Marvel Zombies, so keep an eye out.
Number 6. The Yeti. This Yeti is relegated to another universe because of the series it appears in, which was intended to be, Good for young readers and children, and which was said to exist outside of the main continuity. This Yeti we are talking about here appears in Spidey Super Stories in issue 16. Oh boy. In this team-up book, we see Spider-Man go on adventures that are more kid-friendly when it comes to reading, ideally therefore serving the purpose of helping kids learn how to read, which is important. The Yeti hails from Earth of 57780, and while he might seem like a monster by the end of the story, Spider-Man, also of Earth 57780, seems to have ascertained that the Yeti really is not a bad guy, but is just homesick. He's just stealing a lot of ice cream. So he attempts to help the Yeti by getting him safely home so he can be cold again. Yay.
Number 5, Morbius, the living vampire. It's Morbius' world and we're just living in it. He first appeared in Amazing Spider-Man number 101 in 1971. The story goes, in a desperate attempt to save his own life as he suffers from a rare blood disease, Dr. Mike Morbius turns to a cure that uses vampire bat DNA because of course he does. It mutates him into a half-vampire, half-human monster. It's Morbiclock out there, and Morbius was actually initially kind of a bad guy. He fought Spider-Man and Blade before becoming a vigilante justice sort of anti-hero who struggles with the insatiable lust for blood. He's also desperate to find the cure to his vampirism. Honestly, in the comics, Morbius looks way scarier and monstrous than the Laughingstock movie. I think it's one of those things where the cartoon and artistic medium is much better at portraying the monster than Jared Leto is.
Number 4. MCU Gargantos. Gargantos is one of the monsters from Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness that I thought, might be one of the big bads of that movie. Instead, I was wrong, and the beast was used simply as a distraction. Seemingly modeled after the comic book character Shuma-Gorath, Disney and Marvel decided against using the name of that character for copyright reasons, and so instead decided to use a name that solely belonged to them. Enter Gargantos. Although in the comics, Gargantos is less of a magical monster and instead is kinda like your typical multi-tentacled, one-eyed sea monster. In the film, it takes the combined efforts of Sorcerer Supreme Wong and Dr. Stephen Strange to defeat the beast, and Strange even pulls out some magical monster tricks of his own to stop Gargantos. While Gargantos appears in a multiversal film, him being based off of Shuma-Gorath would likely also make him a multiversal monster just straight up.
Number 3, Ghost Rider. Who could forget Johnny Blaze, one of the Ghost Riders set out to hunt down earthly baddies and drag them kicking and screaming to hell where they belong. The legacy of the Ghost Rider began in the pre-Marvel age with a ghostly cowboy who hunted the prairie of the American frontier. But the modern version is a stunt biker, Johnny Blaze, who becomes possessed by the demon Zarathos and becomes a flame-headed skeleton with a cool bike and fancy leather jacket, hunting down bad guys in the name of vengeance. At times, he's the bad guy himself, being the not polished hero that has no problem taking lives. At others, he fights with the other Marvel heroes to take down bigger foes. I mean, he looks badass, can we be honest here, and he's definitely one of my favorite Marvel monsters.
Number 2. Strange Supreme. Strange Supreme is the Dark Doctor Stephen Strange we see as is showcased in the Disney Plus What If streaming series in the season 1 episode What If Doctor Strange Lost His Heart Instead of His Hands. In this episode, Strange becomes obsessed with getting back Christine Palmer after losing her in a car accident instead of, losing his hands, because Christine was his heart, get it? Because her death is considered an absolute point in time, the spirit of the Ancient One returns to Strange to remind him that he cannot do anything to bring her back. Strange doesn't like that answer and is like, I'm still gonna do stuff, so he gets split in twain, with one half of him choosing to do whatever it takes to get Christine back, because the Ancient One's like, I'm not gonna let that happen. Just cut you in half. This prompts him to turn to the dark arts, absorbing various creatures and monsters from the universe in order to get as much power as is needed to reverse Christine's death. In the end, this Strange of the multiverse becomes more monster than man, defeating his other half by reabsorbing him and breaking the universe to bits when he disregards all warnings and brings Christine back to life anyways once more. Doesn't even work out well because Christine's like, dude, you're like super evil, I'm like not here for this.
Number 1, Shuma-Gorath. Quote, before all was, I was. Before time was, I waited. I fed on the screaming souls of the universe. I drank the spoiled milk of dead stars. I am the emptiness outside all understanding. I am Shuma-Gorath. Is a pretty sweet way to introduce yourself. His character design is next to none as one of the great old ones who first appeared in a 1972 comic called Journey into Mystery Volume 2. This tentacle monster more so looks like a freak of nature than a typical monster. He's the ruler of hundreds of dimensions and comes to the Earth realm millions of years ago along with the other old ones. Around 1 million BC, he was banished from Earth by a time traveler sorcerer named Sneg. It was witnessed by Doctor Strange, who hoped to defeat the Ancient One so his master didn't have to die, but obviously it never really works out like that. But then Shuma-Gorath reappears and becomes the main foe of Doctor Strange. While we can get into his whole villain arc with Doctor Strange, I would prefer to look at the other reality he appeared in with Earth 30847. He became an unlikely savior of Earth, and upon accepting that they thought of him as a hero, he ended up hosting a Japanese game show called the Super Monster Awesome Hour, which honestly, vibes.
Number 10. Anti-living Batman. I am so torn when it comes to this zombie-like infected version of Bats. He hails from the deceased universe where he ends up tragically being infected by the anti-life equation and turned into a member of the anti-living, a mindless, violent zombie. However, before this happens, Batman is one of the first to figure out just what is really going on and to try to find a cure or a way to stop it. In the end, however, he gets infected, and despite trying to slow down the infection with one of Mr. Freeze's cryo suits, succumbs to the virus. He doesn't stay a zombie-like anti-living being for long though, as Alfred Pennyworth, his butler, puts him out of his misery. Really, his whole transformation is just making preparations, passing on vital information to those not yet infected, and saying goodbye to his son Damian Wayne. So he's a monster, but it's a really sad journey getting there.
Number 9. Owlman. Owlman, or Thomas Wayne Jr. of Earth 3, isn't a monster in the physical sense, but certainly in the personality department. If you haven't heard of Earth 3, it's basically a place where strength is praised above all else, and it's home to the Crime Syndicate of America, which is the evil Justice League. Basically, Thomas is about as bad as you can get. For example, as a kid, he believed his parents were mismanaging their money, so he decided to kill them in cold blood. His younger brother Bruce protested to this, and he too was killed. He took the city of Gotham for his own through fear, bribery, and blackmail. He killed the family of Richard Grayson to make the boys susceptible to his influence. He even had a strange affair with Ultraman's partner, Superwoman. Owlman is a bad dude.
Number 8. Batman the Silenced. One of my favorite things about the DC multiverse is that we don't just have the multiverse. We also have the dark multiverse. Or we had the dark multiverse. Anyways, still, I'm confident it will return given time. Just give it enough time and everything comes back around, baby. Thank you, comics. The Dark Multiverse is like the Elseworlds' Dark Reflection, and when it comes to the anthology series Tales of the Dark Multiverse, or Tales from the Dark Multiverse, one or the other, often offered to readers in small batches with creative teams presenting their own dark realities and twists on classic DC tales. One such character and tale that gets twisted in the Dark Multiverse is Batman's Hush. In this world, the roles become reversed, with Thomas Elliot taking over Wayne Enterprises and locking Bruce away in Arkham Asylum, after Bruce moved in with the Elliot family following the death of Martha and Thomas Wayne. However, Elliot isn't Batman in this reality, but a corrupt senator and business owner. It's not a straight role reversal, working with the League of Assassins. Bruce, however, is not as crazy as he seems, and he ends up escaping Arkham and becoming the Silenced, in essence an anti-hero out for revenge on Tommy, whose character design resembles Hush. Did I mention how creepy he is, by the way? He's super creepy.
Number 7. Leatherwing. According to Earth 10's history, the Axis powers managed to achieve history in World War II. With the National Socialist Party victorious, Bruce became a willing agent of their perverse plans, taking on the identity of Leatherwing. As you can imagine, this guy wasn't too great. Holding the beliefs set out by the powers that ruled, he was against interracial relationships, he believed in a master race, and he held up the many fascist ideals of his team, the New Reichman. Thankfully, the New Reichman were betrayed by their leader Overman, who still knew that this way was the wrong way. Still, a crazy racist Batman gives me chills.
Number 6. Red Death. Another villainous version of Bruce Wayne, Red Death also hails from the Dark Multiverse. If you can't tell, I really like the Dark Multiverse. However, he doesn't come from the Tales of the Dark Multiverse series, but is rather one of the Batman Who Laughs Dark Knights. The Dark Knights are basically like an evil collection of Batmen from across the Dark Multiverse, each one standing in or representing a member of the Justice League. Red Death represents the Flash. In his reality, Bruce Wayne was pushed to the limit after losing so many of his sidekicks, believing that he would be better at using the Speed Force than Barry Allen. He stole the Speed Force from him and then proceeded proceeded to use it to kill all of his enemies, becoming known by the speedster and villainous mantle of Red Death.
Number 5. Frankenbat. Castle of the Bat is an Elseworlds story from 1994 that basically takes the story of Frankenstein and plops in Batman characters. So, Bruce Wayne, after suffering the death of his father Thomas Wayne, goes almost mad trying to find a way to bring his father back. He succeeds, but not in the way he or anyone else wants. Thomas Wayne is brought back to life and dresses just like Batman normally would, but with more of a gothic Victorian style. And he's a mindless, massive, undead monstrosity. He busts out of where he's being held, and it leads to Bruce having to apprehend his undead dad. The story is actually quite emotional. Check it out.
Number 4. Gods and Monsters. That's right, in the alternate reality of Gods and Monsters, there isn't really a prominent Bruce Wayne. Instead, here Kirk Langstrom, known as Man-Bat in the Prime Earth and New Earth continuities, takes up the mantle of Batman, becoming part vampire bat, part man, also pseudoscience vampire. He was attempting to create a cure for lymphoma, which did work but ended up splicing his genes and turning him into a science-made vampire. Kirk, as Batman from Gods and Monsters, does need to consume blood to survive and typically feeds on either animals or criminals to get it.
Number 3. The Devastator. On alternate Earth -1, Batman and Superman were pals, and everything was dandy. Until one day, Superman changed and rampaged, turning on humanity. Superman killed almost everyone, and Batman tried his best to help bring his friend back. But once Superman killed Lois Lane and cut off Batman's arm, there was no going back. Batman injected himself with the Doomsday virus, turning him into the Devastator, powering him to take out Superman but also making him lose all his sympathy. He still retains all the knowledge of Bruce Wayne plus the fighting skill, and he acts as the muscle for the Dark Knights. Truly a monstrous Batman.
Number 2. Vampire Batman. Gods and Monsters isn't the only reality where Batman becomes a vampire. Oh no. I mean, he is Batman after all, he's Batman. Obviously he's gonna be vampires a lot. He also ends up as one in his fight against Dracula in Red Rain. However, Bruce attempts to resist fully turning and giving into his monstrous side here. Instead, he attempts to hold off on completing his transformation fully, becoming a sort of Dhampir, if you will. That is until Joker kills Catwoman, who in this series is also a werewolf. Spooky stuff. Joker taking Selina's life makes Bruce snap, and he ends up feeding on him, seemingly killing him, although it would later be revealed that Joker survived this whole ordeal. Afterwards, Batman has Alfred lock him away, worried about the monster he'll become because he has now tasted human blood.
Number 1. The Batman who laughs. I know, I've talked about him like a lot, but it is for a good reason. The Batman who laughs is arguably one of the most dangerous versions of Batman who's ever lived, or been written. If you don't know yet, he is a dark multiverse version of Batman who has killed the Joker, but inadvertently infected himself with a strain of Joker toxin. The resulting transformation turns this version of Bruce Wayne into an amalgamation of Joker and Batman. All the intelligence and resourcefulness and martial skill of Batman mixed with the buck-wild, psychotic, murderous mind of the Joker. He is pure chaos and destruction, and he lays waste to his own Bat family and the Justice League. He has a pack of Jokerized Robins, and he is the leader of the Dark Knights, a few of which were featured on this list. On top of that, he is just truly terrifying to see.
Number 10. Man-Spider. Man-Spider is a version of Peter who ended up mutating and having multiple arms from the main continuity. It was a pretty freaky time in Peter's life and happened after Spider-Man tried to create a cure to get rid of his abilities and return him to his normal old depowered self. Unfortunately for Peter, this definitely did not work as planned and instead just left him with 4 arms instead of 2. Basically the opposite of the desired effect, leaving him more freaky than normal, which was kind of what he was going for. There is a version of the 4-armed Spider-Man who actually ended up keeping the arms instead of getting rid of them, and he hails from the reality of Earth 1298 and is known as Man-Spider, obviously. I'm guessing that having a secret identity would be pretty tricky for someone like Man-Spider. Number 9. Savage Spider-Man. Savage Spider-Man had an upbringing among monsters, and for that reason can be considered kinda monstrous. His appearance isn't super Mr. Monstrous, although he does share his editorial name with a series that seems to feature a pretty frightening looking mainstream Savage Spider-Man, which we may or may not talk about later. Savage Spider-Man of Earth 83043 ended up getting his powers from growing up in the Savage Lands. His story is that he was lost there after the plane he was on with his parents crashed. His parents died in the crash, but young Peter survived and was taken in by the giant spiders of Savage Land, whose toxic bites helped him to build up both an immunity to toxins and also granted him spider-like superpowers. And friends, before we move on to this next spot, if you haven't already, please head on over to Facebook where you can follow us there as well. It really does help us out here and it helps us out there, so yeah, just help us out. And also, thanks for doing that. If you've already done that. You're like, I get it, Amanda, you say it every time. Just want to make sure you know. Number 8. Scarlet Spider. Kane was one of the clones of Peter Parker that we got to know in the Clone Saga. He typically goes by the mantle of Scarlet Spider now, which at one point was actually used by another Peter clone, Ben Reilly. Initially in the comics, Kane was presented more as a villain, or at least a misunderstood villain. He misunderstood hero. He wasn't really completely a straight up villain, but he did some shady things. He was a clone that was basically defective, and as a result his degeneration messed with his mind. He also came with the Mark of Cain, which was pretty monstrous, which allowed him to seemingly burn the skin of those he touched, typically leaving his Mark of Cain on their face. In reality, this was just a variation of Spider-Man's wall crawl power, as when Spider-Man crawls on walls, this is because of little hook hairs basically in his hands and feet, which allow him to stick. See the Sam Raimi movies for that in person. Similar deal for Kane, but he was using this to basically melt people's faces at the time. Number 7. Ghost Spider. Not to be confused with the other Ghost Spider, Gwen Stacy of Earth 65, this Ghost Spider is an alternate version of Peter Parker from Earth 11638. In this reality, Uncle Ben did not die and was there to help mentor Peter Parker as he continued on his journey as a hero. Peter here became not just a celebrity and an icon as a superhero, but was also a successful business owner and a philanthropist. However, in secret, he and Ben were working together to lure other Spider-Men from other realities to their world so that they could zap them of their power, killing them in the process in order to bolster Earth 11638 Spider-Man, transferring their powers to him and making him stronger. In the end, Spider-Man of Earth 616, who fell into this trap, helped Earth 11638 Peter Parker to see the error of his ways. Having a change of heart, this version of Spider-Man sacrificed himself to save 616 Peter, ending up in a coma as a result. He was returned to life by an alternate Sorcerer Supreme who needed his help, and then came back as the Ghost Spider, who kinda looks like a blue flame Ghost Rider. Number 6. Mainstream Savage Spider-Man. Mainstream Savage Spider-Man comes from his own self-titled series, which spins out of Non-Stop Spider-Man. So if you wanted to read Savage Spider-Man, I'd recommend going back and reading that first. I think it's only like 5 issues, so it's also not too long. This story, I believe, is part of the mainstream continuity, so technically the Peter Parker that we see here in his monstrous form is in fact Earth 616 Peter Parker. In the Non-Stop Spider-Man series, there was even mention of the Beyond Corporation, which also helped me to really cement this, at least in my mind, as part of the main continuity canon. I mean, I saw it was kind of listed as that, but I was skeptical, and then I saw that and I was like, nah, no, it's probably main continuity. I think we can definitely say it's main continuity. So hopefully I am right and not wrong about that. But while this is technically 616, it's also a very specific look and time in Peter's life, like back when he had those 4 arms, which we kind of touched on earlier. So I figured I could count it for the purpose of this list. It's also where our thumbnail for this video will likely come from, so thought it might be cool to explain it if you're like, hey, well, what's that thing? That's Savage Spider-Man. Savage Spider-Man is Earth 616 Peter Parker mutated by the drug known as A+, which typically improves performance at the cost of intelligence for most users. However, for Spider-Man, due to his unique physiology, it also turned him into a kinda like part man, part spider monster hybrid thing. Poor Peter. Number 5. Spider-Man. Spider-Man is definitely one of the creepiest ideas for an alternate Spider-Man that we've seen in maybe ever. This version of Peter Parker was actually consumed by spiders, but his consciousness was also absorbed by them. So while physically he's gone, mentally he kinda like lives on in them. He's literally a Spider-Man made of spiders. Hence the name Spiders-Man. He has a tragic backstory, but don't feel too bad for him. He also would be the one to team up with a Norman Osborn version of Spider-Man, plotting to betray the rest of the Spider Army that he had been recruited to. And he also, as a bunch of spiders, seems to enjoy kinda eating people, a taste he developed as time went on. Number 4. Patton Parnell. Patton Parnell is one of the vilest alternates of Spider-Man around. He shows up during our exploration of the Spider-Verse, where we learn that he is a fairly sadistic alternate of Peter Parker, whose hobbies include things like burning ants with a magnifying glass on hot sunny days, and spying on his neighbor whom he's kinda obsessed with, Sarah Jane. Patton, of course, is likely twisted in part because it is heavily implied that his uncle mistreats him. He is bitten by a spider, but instead of gaining miraculous abilities that all in all make him a more responsible person and a hero, he becomes a spider-like creature, mutating and becoming more monstrous and murderous, both inside and out. Yikes. Number 3. Poison. Poison is an alternate version of Peter Parker inspired by the Spider-Man story The Other. He hails from a what if where we explore the idea of what would have happened had Spider-Man rejected his connection to the spider within and rejected instead of embracing his role as a spider totem. This would have left Peter vulnerable basically to outside attack. Trapped within his cocoon with no way out, the symbiotic being that we often refer to as Venom sensed Peter's vulnerability and saw a chance to merge with him. Venom then leaves his current host Matt Gargan to forcibly connect with Peter, and together they become Poison. Poison is horrifying and attempts to recruit Mary Jane as his partner, but after she rejects him, he believes that the corpse of Gwen Stacy will suit him better. Oh dear. Number 2. Matt Gargan. Matt Gargan is known as the Spider-Man villain Scorpion, but at one point he too became an alternate version of Spider-Man, albeit a really messed up and twisted version, as he served as Spider-Man for Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers, which was primarily made up of villains posing as heroic counterparts. In Mac's case, the heroic mantle he was made to fill in for was Spider-Man, although he wasn't so much Spider-Man but kinda like an alternate Venom posing as Spider-Man. His suit was made of the symbiotic being known as Venom, who was merged with him at the time, and was also like really juiced. But Norman fixed it so that he wouldn't appear as juiced. He still kinda got like a little giant. He got a little giant when it came to him attacking people though. This often turned Matt Gargan's Spider-Man into a horrifying monster who threatened to, and often actually did, devour those people who stood in his way, even sometimes almost eating his own teammate, which obviously they did not like. Number 1. I-APEC. I-APEC is known in Marvel Comics as I-APEC the Decapitator, and was once worshipped as a god in Peru. Remember how we talked about Man-Spider earlier? I-APEC is like a more terrifying version of that being. He is typically known as having pointed teeth, snakes for hair with multiple arms, and his lower half being the hairy body and legs of a spider. He ended up getting recruited to Norman Osborn's Dark Avengers to act as their Spider-Man after Matt Gargan was Spider-Man, because this was a different version of Spider-Man, a different version of the Dark Avengers, after Norman Osborn escaped the Wrath the second time, this time successfully, and then attempted to resurrect Hammer and bring back the Dark Avengers. I-APEC was made to look more humanoid, more like Spider-Man with a genetic formula, except for the fact that, you know, he had 4 arms still, so almost like Spider-Man, but not quite. Later on, he would also be coerced into serving on Luke Cage's Dark Avengers, which were kinda like DC's Suicide Squad at the time.
At number 10, we have Vampire Ultraman. This is a double alternate of Superman because he's already Ultraman, who's considered to be a dark, evil version of the hero we all know and love, but after Batman turns Ultraman into a vampire, the character just delves that much deeper into the uncanny. As if a Superman alternative gone bad isn't enough to handle on its own, this guy has a thirst for blood and takes every chance he can get to recruit more superpowered beings into his Justice League of Vampires. This is a perfect example of how messy, but also really fun, things can get when the multiverse gets involved. I think it's fair to say that Earth 43 is not a place I'd like to visit anytime soon. Okay, at number 9 we have Parallax Superman. Parallax is an evil entity that lives in the Yellow Lantern's central power battery, and he is described as the living embodiment of fear. Basically, this insect-like creature is something of a parasite that takes over a number of hosts throughout various storylines in the comics. One of those times, he takes over Superman, and the combination of these two beings naturally creates a very evil and powerful monster. And what makes it even crazier is that the origin of Parallax Superman came about by Superman's own will. In defense of a group of helpless schoolchildren, classic, Superman decides to give in to the evil parasite and allow it to steal his essence. The only way Superman is able to yield Parallax from his body is by shedding all his fears and, using Thal Sinestro's ring, capturing and banishing Parallax forever. Phew. At number 8, we've got Vampire Superman from World's Finest, issue number 249. This version of the hero only appears for a short time in this one issue when Batman and Phantom Stranger are out at sea on a ship with a small crew. What appears to be going on is a Vampire Superman trying to turn the crewmates into fellow vampires themselves. So when Batman shines a light on Vampire Superman, sending him inside and into a coma. I don't really get why this happens, but basically Batman then attempts to drive a stake into Superman's heart, as one does if they're trying to kill a vampire. But Phantom Stranger stops him and turns the stake on the crewmates, who he reveals as being the real culprits. And for some strange, complicated reason, Superman then comes to and the crewmates are defeated and turned to coral? I don't know. This story was hard to follow, but for a time there, Superman fell victim to vampirism. And this is a scary moment because besides kryptonite, many people aren't aware that another of his weaknesses is magical enchantment, including vampirism and werewolfism. Is that the right term? Werewolfism? Okay, at number 7, Feral Man of Steel. This isn't really a version of Superman that is fundamentally changed into a monster. He's still a man, and he's still Superman, except he's been raised by a pack of wolves in the jungle. In Superman Annual number 6, a DC Comics Elseworld special tells the story of Kal-El, it's spelled K-L-L this time, a version of Kal-El where his ship actually crashes deep in the Indian jungle. There he's adopted by Mirar. It's just M, R, and R. Basically, she's a she-wolf and she raises Superman as one of her own. But of course, this leaves this version of Superman as a silent type. A wolfman who is on the verge of being entirely feral. However, deep down, the good values of the Superman we all know are demonstrated when he actually spares the life of an adventurer who kills his wolf mother and one of her cubs. Basically, feral Superman is integrated into human civilization and given the name of Clark, continuing on as a version of Superman closer to the one we're used to. At number 6, we've got Werewolf Superman. In Superman Volume 1, issue 422, we see a cover that makes us jump for a second, thinking that our beloved Clark Kent has been overtaken by a werewolf curse. But no, this isn't actually Superman turned werewolf. What it is though, is a werewolf who takes Superman's costume off of him and wears it. He wears it around for a while. So, for a moment, we get a pretty crazy visual of a drooling, feral wolf man wearing the Superman suit. And we're also left with another visual of a totally naked Clark Kent lying defeated on the floor, but that's neither here nor there. What's crazy about this encounter is that this werewolf actually takes out Superman, knocking him down for long enough that he's actually able to steal the costume, forcing Superman to throw on a pretty sweet one-piece tracksuit and fly somewhere that he can properly change back into his Clark clothes. Later, he finds the culprits of the werewolf serum and then takes them all out naturally, without getting bitten himself, luckily. At number 5, we've got Bizarro. The first time the world sees Bizarro is in Superboy issue number 68 in October 1958. Bizarro is created when Superman is hit with a duplicate ray and what is left is a gray-skinned, opposite version of Superman. Originally from Hertre, that's Earth backwards, yes, Bizarro and other subsequent hero opposites are under the impression that good deeds are actually against the law. But in a newer interpretation of Bizarro, he's not much of a threat to Superman, or anyone else for that matter. In the 2017 publication, he's known as sort of a goofy monstrosity that even Clark Kent isn't concerned about. The S on his chest is backwards, he has a little chupacabra as a pet named Colin, and he has horrendous grammar. If you tell him to go right, he'll go lefty ways, and if you ask him to stop, he'll go start. Basically, everyone around him sees him as a big handful and not much more, which is good, because he's still a powerful being from another planet. At number 4 is the Superman Monster. This is a classic mashup story, basically marrying Superman and Frankenstein into one. A guy named Victor Luther comes across an alien spacecraft with the remains of a baby boy within it. When he realizes that the child was supposed to have arrived intact, he devises a plan to revive the being using the body parts of dead bodies found in a local graveyard. Using the advanced alien technology from the ship, Luther creates a revival matrix and brings this monstrous version of Superman to life. But just like the classic story goes, the resulting creature doesn't quite turn out the way that Luther had planned. He's a little grayer and more decayed than he'd like, so Luther rejects him and gets pretty badly injured in the process. The rest of the story is basically more parallels to Mary Shelley's Frankenstein, so if you're interested in hearing about the story of Superman and Frankenstein mashed together, go check out the story. It's a one-off, so it probably wouldn't take very long to read. At number 3, we have Super Demon, or Etrigan. This demonic version of the Man of Steel is known as one of the many Supermen of the Dark Multiverse. His origin begins when he's rocketed to an Earth of eternal twilight from a dark planet called Camelot. Luckily, this thing still fights against evil despite his monstrous appearance. At one point, he faces off against Vampire Ultraman, who I previously mentioned on the list, and he's eventually targeted by Prophecy, who wants to steal Etrigan's powers from him. But he's able to escape with the help of Justice Incarnate and goes off to try and free the other Supermen in the Dark Multiverse. This guy has basically every power that Superman has except augmented just a little bit, and often calling on fire as the element of choice. He's got fire breath, hellfire vision, and when he recites a magical verse, is able to unleash what is only described as a burst of hellfire upon his enemies. At number 2 is Sand Superman. This entity is neither human or Kryptonian alien, but a mixture of energy from Quarm, sand from Earth, and some of Superman's powers that have been siphoned out of him. This creation is not quite a monster, but it is an uncanny recreation of the hero that honestly kind of creeps me out. Almost as much as a zombie or vampire version of Superman might. It doesn't have any soul inside of it, and for a time is set on draining even more of Superman's powers from him. Although it does come around and start to act more like Superman does, acting as a selfless superhero, fighting crime and all that. It still poses a threat to Superman, and the rest of the world for that matter, because due to this creature being composed of alternately charged atoms to Superman, and only gains power when Superman loses it, and vice versa, it's known that if Sand Superman comes in contact with real Superman, there would be a devastating explosion powerful enough to destroy the planet. So yeah, Sand Superman, not to be messed with. And kinda creepy, honestly. Okay, we're at number 1, and I have to put Blackest Night Superman here. 2 words, Zombie Superman. This version of Superman comes back from the dead and terrorizes Smallville with the added powers of a Black Lantern. In the comics, he's able to read people's fear and their power levels with what seems like a built-in HUD system. He's just a predator in all senses of the word. But when they face off, Zombie Superman is able to see more human emotions in Superman than he had in the people of Smallville. Fear, love, hope, will, and on top of it all, this zombie Superman uses Superman's own mother against him, putting her life in peril, and even Clark's dog, which is where I personally draw the line. Thank God he and Superboy put an end to this undead nightmare at the end of the series.
10. Claw. Claw, which is Hulk backwards, is basically what happens when the Hulk goes Hulk. He is another one of the evil personalities inside Bruce Banner's head. This version of Hulk has black skin with these rad glowing red scars. He has red demonic eyes, white hair, and big old talons. Claw emerges when Hulk reaches a sufficient level of rage, which is strange because regular Hulk has gotten way more powerful than this version of Hulk. The Claw personality is usually suppressed and has only shown up a few times, and not for very long, I might add. He appeared first in the Axis storyline, where heroes and villains had their morality switched. Hulk isn't exactly always a perfect dude. He will go on rampages and hurt people. He doesn't intend to. Over time, he has been able to hone his rampages into one target, or even not rampage like that at all. But since Claw is his opposite, he lets his rage hurt and maim everyone, putting even the villains on alert. He looks terrifyingly awesome and no one is safe from his rage. Number 9. Infernal Hulk. On Earth 11638, Bruce Banner was officially completely done with dealing with the unpredictability and rage of the Hulk. So, when Spider-Man introduced Bruce to Stephen Strange, the Sorcerer Supreme, Banner became his apprentice, and after lots of training in the mystic arts, learned how to separate himself from the Hulk entity. He did this by sending it to hell and making it a demon. And this was a great solution, until the 616 Hulk, along with Deadpool and Spider-Man, came to Earth 11638. The Infernal Hulk managed to enter back into the realm of Earth, swapping places with 616 Banner's Hulk persona. Infernal Hulk went after the new Sorcerer Supreme, Bruce Banner, who was saved by both Deadpool and Spider-Man. So, how did they defeat this demon Hulk? Well, Sorcerer Bruce reversed the banishing spell that sent Hulk to hell, and just before Infernal Hulk could return to his original Bruce Banner body, Bruce had his neck snapped, killing him. But his spirit lived on in the astral plane, so it's all good. Number 8. Marvel Apes. Marvel Apes is Well, I mean, it's all the Marvel characters as apes. It's pretty self-explanatory, actually. After Marvel Zombies, which I'm sure you're tired of hearing about, Marvel wanted another cool and weird alternate universe. So, we got this. I actually really like it, but I'm a sucker for alternate worlds. Like the regular Hulk, this ape Hulk was a big green monstrosity. He resembled a big gorilla and he was obviously furry. So that's like the main difference. He was still the strongest ape out there and extremely prone to smashing things whenever he got upset. This ape Hulk helped in the battle against the vampiric ape Vengers and would later join a group dubbed the Prime 8, led by Nick Fury.
Hulk smash like and subscribe button. Hulk angry but Hulk still love nerds. Puny Adam, get on with video.
Number 7. Maestro. Okay, imagine a version of the Hulk with twice his strength who retains the intelligence of Bruce Banner. Now, take that Hulk and make him a ruthless, tyrannical ruler, power hungry and evil. And you get Maestro. Our Hulk first comes into contact with him when Rick Jones' daughter takes him into the future to fight his evil future self. But this Maestro easily overpowers the Hulk. In their very first fight, Maestro went to town on the Hulk and won by simply snapping Hulk's neck. That's it. Game over, man! Game over! He then waited for Hulk to heal, taunting him and villain monologuing at him the whole time about all the terrible things they go through as the Hulk, trying to get Hulk to join his side. The only way our Hulk could win was to bring Maestro back in time, to when they gained their abilities. The Gamma Bomb, which destroyed Maestro on an atomic scale. The sheer idea of Hulk becoming Maestro haunted Bruce and Hulk's thoughts for the rest of time. Number 6. Null, Breaker of Worlds. When Kull Borson, known as the Serpent, who was the villainous brother of Odin, sent down 7 magical hammers to Earth that represented his 7 followers, the hammer Null found its way to our hulking mass of green, transforming him into Null, Breaker of Worlds. Null went rampaging all over South America, bringing him into conflict with the Avengers, who he defeated, and eventually into a fight with Thor. When fighting Thor, Null teamed up with Angrier, Breaker of Souls, which was the Thing, who also got one of these hammers, who was defeated by Thor. But we all know who the strongest Avenger is, don't we? Null was just a bit too powerful for Thor, and instead of facing him one-on-one, the God of Thunder threw Hulk into orbit. He landed in Transylvania and started taking on Dracula and his minions. It was only after Inca, disguised as Betty Ross, showed up that Hulk threw the hammer aside and left to go be in solitude for being used yet again. Number 5. Hulk 2099. Most of us comic book fans know about Spider-Man 2099. It's an incredible story and character, and it was crazy successful. Because of this, Marvel wanted to capitalize, like you do, and they made more 2099 versions of their characters. One such character was Hulk. This version of the Hulk is actually a guy named John Eisenhart. John didn't get his powers after being a scientist though. In the world of 2099, there was a cult known as the Knights of Banner, which, to sidetrack for a second, is a pretty sweet name. But anyways, John was a studio executive and the Knights of Banner wanted to create another Hulk while also making a movie about their cult's history. Yeah, it's weird, I don't know. Eisenhart joins the cult and gets caught in a gamma explosion, turning him into the Hulk. He was a bit different though. For starters, he is terrifying, but he can control his rage, meaning his strength didn't grow indefinitely. He also has claws that can slice through most materials, and his freaky elongated tongue is super strong, which is weird. Number 4. Hulk Venom. In What If Number 4, what if the alien costume had possessed Spider-Man? Spider-Man is unable to get rid of the Venom symbiote suit, and he enlists aid from other heroes. Hulk just happens to be one of the first to show up, and the symbiote takes an instant liking to Hulk, which kinda makes me wonder why this hasn't happened before, honestly. It easily bonds to Hulk, overpowering his weak mind. So now you have all the powers of Hulk, plus the powers of Spider-Man, which is an interesting idea, truth be told. Number 3. Skulk. The Amalgam comics in the 90s brought the fans one of the things they always wished they had: the heroes of the DC universe and the Marvel universe coming together. It saw the heroes facing each other, but it also, more interestingly, saw mashed together versions of characters. It's how we got the Batman-Wolverine hybrid Dark Claw, who is awesome, but it's also how we got Skulk. Skulk was the combination of Solomon Grundy and the Hulk. Bruce Banner was minding his own business, conducting gamma bond tests in the desert, the kind of thing you do on your perfect Sunday, and then Solomon Grundy appeared. Bruce tried to save the superhuman zombie from the explosion, but the bomb fused the two together, forming Skulk. Skulk was really just Solomon Grundy but with the Hulk's iconic purple pants, but I feel like the powers of these two characters fused together should be way more awesome than this. Number 2. Ultimate Hulk. Yes, the Ultimate Universe's version of Hulk is similar to the regular Hulk, but his personality? Nuh-uh honey, it is whack. Bruce Banner, no matter where you find him, is an emotionally scarred dude. It's why he is the way he is, but the Ultimate Bruce Banner? He is selfish, self-absorbed, and just creepy. He was so desperate to be noticed and recognized, he willingly injected himself with an experimental version of a new super soldier formula, turning him into a monstrous version of the Hulk. This Hulk had little to no regard for human life and collateral damage. He even ate people, it was nuts. Ultimate Hulk would join up with Maker, Quicksilver, Kang, and a mind-controlled Human Torch to make up the team known as the Dark Ultimates. He would eventually align himself to be a bit better, but not by much. Number 1. Guilt Hulk. The Guilt Hulk is very similar to Devil Hulk, who represents his anger. Only this version of Hulk represents all the guilt and regret that the Hulk feels for all the horrible things he has inadvertently done while in his Hulk form, as well as the horrible things done to him as Bruce, like being shunned and feared and all the horrible things that were done to him by his father, Brian Banner, which is a huge reason behind Bruce having multiple personality disorder in the first place. Because this persona represents all these things, it's actually more powerful than the Devil Hulk persona. Guilt Hulk even took on the form of Bruce's father inside his head before becoming his true form, which is like a weird xenomorph looking Hulk. This Hulk is incredibly powerful, and it took the combined efforts of many of Bruce's other alter egos to hold and keep the other Guilt Hulk persona repressed deep in Bruce's mind. Number 10. Weapon X. After the Mutant Legion went back in time and accidentally killed Xavier, Apocalypse came out of hibernation 10 years too early and took over control of the United States. Enter the Age of Apocalypse story. The Logan of Age of Apocalypse is extremely ferocious, and he goes by the name Weapon X. He has only one hand after having it blasted off by Cyclops, but his claws still pop through the nub. He and Jean Grey set off apart from the X-Men to save mutants and stop Apocalypse. Weapon X eventually becomes the new Apocalypse, gaining his celestial and mutant powers to try and stop aliens from destroying the population of Earth. It's nuts! I suggest you check out the story. Number 9. Dark Claw. So what happens if you take Logan and you take Bruce Wayne and just mash them up together? Do some quick maths and you'll find you get Logan Wayne. This awesome character is from the Amalgam universe of Earth 9602. After he saw the murder of his parents, Logan went to live with his uncle up in Alberta, Canada, who was then de-lifed by poachers. He then went to kick it with some nuns and then joined up with the Canadian Air Force. At some point, he joined the Weapon X program and learned of his mutation and gained his claws alongside Creed H. Quinn, who would become a Wolverine Joker hybrid named Hyena. Logan Wayne would go back to New Gotham City, where he decided to avenge his parents' and uncle's deaths by donning the costume and name of Dark Claw. Number 8. Feral Wolverine. Imagine you had an adamantium coating on your skeleton, and then one day a guy who controls metal comes along and rips it all out of your body. Think you'd go a little crazy? Well, no, you probably wouldn't survive. But if you were Wolverine with that healing factor, then yeah, you would. And then you'd almost definitely lose a bit of sanity. That's exactly what happened to turn Wolverine feral after the 1993 Fatal Attraction crossover. The adamantium was actually holding back a secondary mutation that turns Wolverine feral, and he became an absolutely scary monster, even being drawn without a nose for some reason. Number 7. Werewolf Wolverine. Bet you thought you'd see a zombie Wolverine on this list. Well, you were wrong. I saw that some of you are tired of hearing me talk about Marvel Zombies all the time, so in this point I'm going to be talking about Marvel Zombies / Army of Darkness. And it's not a zombie, it's a werewolf, so there. When Ash is sent through a portal in issue number 5, he goes to multiple different worlds before settling on a world where a whole bunch of heroes have turned to werewolves. And Wolverine is one such hero, or villain, I guess now. He gets a sweet whiff of Ash, and he and the other werewolves descend on him in the final pages of the comic. Hey bub, You're gonna like this video, right? I'm sorry, I can't be intimidating, but maybe if I ask really nicely, you'll want to subscribe? Maybe? I'll let you decide while I continue making this video. Number 6, Vampire Wolverine. Another what if? Yep, in What If number 24, Wolverine is actually immune to being turned into a vampire from just a regular bite. Instead, when he kills Dracula, he actually decides to have a little snack on the dead vampire, and this is what actually turns the mutant. He becomes the new Lord of the Vampires in Dracula's place. This version and character even kills and feasts on most of the other members of the X-Men. So it's Wolverine, but with the ferocity and lethality of a vampire. Wait, isn't that just normal Wolverine? Number 5, Deathlock Wolverine. On Earth 11045, all superhumans were converted into mindless cyborg Deathlocks, and then used as a global police force that created a global utopia for the everyday man. Wolverine was one of these superhumans that was converted. He and the rest of the Deathlock X-Force are sent to the past together to secure the world and kill X-Force of the past and Uncanny X-Force number 6. Again with time travel? Come on! At least he looks totally terrifying. Number 4, Pac Logan. Yes, it's another feral version of the character. This time at least, he isn't completely alone. Joining him in his animalistic state are Sabretooth and Wildchild. The three roam the wilds of the Canadian wilderness as a pack. While living in the wild and barely wearing any clothes, they aren't completely mindless. They actually recruit some of the other mutants to go to the Weapon X facility and discover their dark past. That is until they totally lose control and kill everyone. Yeah, maybe they are mindless. Number 3, Weapon H. What do you get when you combine Wolverine and the Hulk? An absolute monster of a character. In Totally Awesome Hulk number 21, we're introduced to Clayton Cortez, a former Marine who was subjected to Weapon X, Batch H division, which primarily tried to create Hulk-Wolverine hybrid cyborgs. Clayton became H-Alpha. He had an adamantium skeleton, a healing factor, and claws just like Wolverine, but the ability to change from human form to his Hulk-like form that gave him near limitless super strength and other Hulk abilities. He is an absolute beast, and his creator says that he can defeat nearly everyone on the planet, which I believe. Number 2, Venom Old Man Logan. Thank the Lord for the Venomverse. It's home to some of the best alternate versions of comic book characters. For example, One Venom is the continuation of the Old Man story that has Logan get eaten by the Venom T-Rex. The symbiote deems Logan a more worthy host and bonds with him, and he bursts out of the T-Rex as Venom Wolverine. This version of Wolverine is insane, lacking in ethics, uncaring, and sports a whole whack of symbiote weaknesses, which kind of makes him a tiny little bit less cool, but Venom Wolverine! He's scary, check him out. Number 1, Sideburns, the Regenerating Planet. When Galactica, the daughter of Galactus, is looking for her next meal in issue number 1 of her self-titled comic, she finds Earth, a lovely little snack. But while looking at her dinner option, she comes upon Wolverine. Realizing his mutant regenerative abilities, she formulates an idea of using a bit of his harvested DNA with a bit of celestial power to create Sideburn, the Regenerating Planet, a planet-sized Galactus meal that would grow back after each meal, giving them billions of years of meals. Unfortunately, she realizes just as quickly that a planet made up of Canadian mutant DNA like this would be highly unstable. Unfortunate, because I'd love to see this guy floating through the galaxy. Coming in at number 10 is Frankenstein's Monster. In case you have never heard of Frankenstein's Monster, the creature was originally the creation of English author Mary Shelley, who wrote a novel in 1818 titled Frankenstein that tells the story of Victor Frankenstein, a young scientist who creates a sentient undead creature in a scientific experiment. It's actually a very deep and somewhat moving story. Now, the Marvel Universe version of Frankenstein and his monster isn't too different. In 1788, Victor Frankenstein left his family estate in Geneva, Switzerland to study natural science. Victor became obsessed with the idea of recreating life and began robbing graveyards in order to acquire body parts that he then stitched together and subjected to chemical treatments and electrolysis. But it horrified the scientist and he fled, leaving the monster alone in the world. Frankenstein, being an undead being, is essentially immortal and immune to disease. He can lift around 10 tons, he has superhuman stamina and durability, and he can replace any lost limbs with other people's limbs, which is both creepy and kinda cool. Number 9, Vampire by Night. I honestly didn't know there was also a Vampire by Night, and she's actually related to the Werewolf by Night. Nina Price, the niece of Jack Russell, the Werewolf by Night, is also an ancestor of Grigory Russoff. Nina's mother, Lisa Russell, was a victim of the same curse as Jack Russell, except things changed for this branch of the family when an altercation with a sorcerer named Glitter Knight freed Lissa from being a werewolf. Lissa married and had Nina with a wealthy man named Mr. Price. Unfortunately, the werewolf curse continued to Nina, but at some point, Nina was attacked by a vampire, which altered the curse for Nina and caused her to be both a werewolf and vampire in one. By day, Nina Price seemed to be a normal human, but once the sun goes down, she becomes a vampire, which is a good way of getting around the whole sunburning weakness. Due to the werewolf's curse though, Nina does become a white wolf during the full moon, but she uses her father's money and status to reserve a zoo or park, caging herself there until the full moon was over and she was no longer an animal. However, Nina had no problem using her supernatural abilities to harm criminals. Rightfully so. Nerds, if you are enjoying this video, I call upon you to hit the like button. It is all you have to do to show us your support here at Top 10 Nerd. Number 8. Reptile. While accompanying his parents on an archaeological dig, Humberto Lopez and his family discovered a fossilized amulet. Humberto eventually took possession of this fossil, which activated one day when a rock slide occurred, nearly burying him. Berto ran as fast as he could, and once he was far away, he noticed that his legs had transformed into those of a dinosaur. That's because the amulet that Berto and his family discovered was magically created by the Hag of the Pits to imbue its bearer with the abilities of prehistoric animals as well as empathic communication with them to defend said animals when the time came. His powers were also later augmented with pin particles to allow him to alter his size. Now originally, Reptile could only transform certain parts of his body into different aspects of dinosaurs, like the wings of a pterodactyl, the tail of a stegosaurus, the head of a parasaur, and the legs of a velociraptor, that kind of thing. He could also only maintain one transformation at a time. He could even just enhance his senses like vision and hearing, but eventually Reptile was able to fully transform into a complete dinosaur or even other prehistoric animals like insects, which gave him enhanced healing. Number 7. Sasquatch. Although the Sasquatch or Bigfoot in the real world is a folklore monster, in Marvel he is actually Walter from down the street. Walter Lankowski, or Sasquatch, is actually a gamma mutate. The Canadians started to focus on gamma research after meeting Bruce Banner, and then specifically, he focused on the Hulk after learning Hulk was indeed Bruce. While on leave from MIT, Dr. Lankowski began working on a gamma radiation experiment that could create a being like the Hulk, only under more controlled circumstances. Being bombarded by massive amounts of gamma radiation, Walter turned into a huge, hairy, light brown creature with similar abilities to the Hulk, and after rampaging, he learned how to retain his intelligence and personality while transformed, joining Alpha Flight as their heavy hitter. More recently, he actually got possessed by Doc Samson and is now green, and technically Sasquatch is Samson, so I hope that's not too confusing, because I'm confused. Number 6. Electro 1. Alright, Electro 1 should probably be on a list of robots, but his story is so classic monster-like that I just wanted to include him. A scientist named Wilbur Poole set out to create the world's most advanced computer, but a bizarre accident caused the computer to become sentient. It then brainwashed Poole and forced him to build a body to house itself. When Poole had finished the body, the computer moved itself to the robot and went out into the world, rampaging, like they always do. Electro, as the people called it, came into conflict with the US military, who proved no match for the numerous powers of the robot, which included psionic force fields, gamma ray blasts, atomic manipulation of living creatures, and object levitation, while also having a robotic metal body. He was eventually defeated by his creator and then eventually found by Reed Richards, who shrunk him down and set the robot to work in the Baxter building. Electro 1 also joined the Fing Fang 4 and fought off the warlord Tim Boo Ba, which is a great sentence. Then he got confused for the villain Electro and was arrested. You should have seen that one coming though, I don't know. Number 5. Goom. Goom, the Thing from Planet X. In the Tales of Suspense number 15 from October 1960, the astronomer Mark Langley wanted to see if there was life on a planet he discovered called Planet X. So, he tried to communicate with anyone through a transmitter. Unfortunately, the alien known as Goom received the transmission and followed the signal back to Earth, arriving in his ship to conquer the world. In a show of power against the world's leaders, Goom showed off some of his abilities and technology, like a time machine that could reverse someone back into a baby, a weapon that could destroy an entire mountain, or a force field that protected him from any weapon. He was even able to lift an entire city with his mind, but thankfully, the other members of his race, who were all pacifists, were contacted. They came, arrested Goom, and took him back to their planet. Number 4. Godzilla. Did you know Godzilla was a part of Marvel? He was even a part of Earth 616. Starting in May 1977, Marvel Comics published comics all about Godzilla. As some of you may know, Godzilla came to be during a Pacific nuclear bomb test in the 1950s, in Tokyo in 1956. But then, the monster became trapped in ice off the coast of Alaska. It then resurfaced in the modern day, and S.H.I.E.L.D. put together a Godzilla squad to try and take on the massive creature. It went rampaging all over America, doing battle with S.H.I.E.L.D., the Champions, the Fantastic Four, Iron Man, the West Coast Avengers, a massive Red Ronin robot, and more. Using his incredible nuclear atomic fire breath, insanely durable hide, regenerative powers, and its surprising intelligence. Number 3. The Hulk. Probably the most well-known monster in Marvel Comics, if you wanted to call him that. The power of the Hulk is almost unmatched. You know the story. When testing a gamma bomb he developed, Bruce Banner rushed out into the blast radius to save Rick Jones. He was blasted with an insane amount of gamma radiation, turning him into a hulking, gray-colored beast with incredible amounts of strength, durability, stamina, regeneration, speed, adaptation, and the ability to seemingly never pass away. His rampages are the things of legend, and the Hulk was the original reason all the Avengers even came together in the first place. One of the best characters Marvel has under its roof. Number 2. Mangog. The Mangog is the physical manifestation of the strength and hatred of a billion beings belonging to a race that was completely wiped out by the ruler of Asgard, Odin. To call him powerful is a bit of an understatement. While Thor has managed to defeat Mangog, usually by tapping into the omnipotent potential of the Odin Force, as long as hate exists in the universe, Mangog will exist and grow more powerful as hate grows and festers, even during battles. He's gone toe-to-toe with Odin, who is one of the most powerful beings in the universe. In fact, Mangog is one of the few beings that Odin is actually afraid of. He's fought both Thor and Odin at the same time to the point that they were completely incapacitated. He swatted away Mjolnir like a fly and taken star-destroying weapons to the face with ease, and he's even survived being thrown into the sun with only a minor char. Number 1. Shuma Gorath. Yes, it is a giant tentacled eyeball, but hold off on the laughter because Shuma Gorath the Destroyer, the Conqueror of Midnight, the All-Killer of the Dawn, is a ridiculously ancient being and greatest of the old gods or many angled ones. Among his many powers is the ability to communicate with and control others nearby and across dimensions. He can create and direct powerful blasts of mystical energy and affect transmutations on a planetary scale. His skin alone is difficult to damage even with the most powerful of magic. While his form seems silly, it's actually only a shell containing his power, and he can alter his appearance and his true form is not even visible to humans. He can destroy multiple galaxies solely through his aura pressure, and Shuma Gorath also has the ability to destroy realities. He is most powerful in his home dimension, just like others of his kind, and only part of his power has actually appeared on Earth. And with the stuff he has done, that should tell you just how powerful he is. And at number 10 is Werewolf by Night. Jack Russell, the Werewolf by Night, made his Marvel debut in 1971's Marvel Spotlight number 2. He was actually born in Transylvania as Jacob Rusoff. Russell is a descendant of Grigory Rusoff, who in 1795 was turned into a werewolf after fighting Dracula. Grigory managed to keep the curse dormant for many generations until it was reactivated by Jack's grandfather, Gregor, using powers from a copy of the Darkhold. When under the full moon, the curse turns Gregor and his descendants into werewolves with supernatural abilities including enhanced strength, stamina, agility, reflexes, speed, senses, and durability with a regenerative healing factor, but a weakness of silver. In his solo series from 1972, Jack fights threats like Dracula and enemies that either want to steal his abilities or steal his family's copy of the Darkhold. He even came into a famous conflict in issue number 32 in May of 1975 that introduced Moon Knight to Marvel Comics. He is also soon to be a part of the MCU alongside a few other monsters. Number 9. Franken-Castle. After he was killed by Daken on orders from Norman Osborn during the Dark Reign event, Frank Castle, yes, the Punisher, was revived by the Legion of Monsters as an undead zombie-like monster known as Franken-Castle. The Legion resurrected Frank to recruit him in their fight against the villain known as Hellsguard, who was systematically killing off monsters using samurai-like assassins. Although he originally refused to help, Frank got involved after seeing innocent younger monsters being dispatched too, and that is not something Frank is willing to abide. So he went on to slay hordes of Hellsguard's men. It's honestly an incredibly interesting moment in Frank Castle's history, and it got this version of Frank moved to Earth 666. He also nearly enacted revenge against Daken, being stopped by Wolverine before he was returned to his human form through the Bloodstone. Hey guys, if you're enjoying this video and you aren't already subscribed, be sure to slap that subscribe button to see more lists and explanation videos all about comic book characters. Number 8. Nkonthu the Living Mummy. Nkonthu was the leader of a very strong tribe in the Sub-Sahara that was enslaved by the Egyptians around 3,000 years ago. After he led a revolt against the pharaoh and even took the pharaoh's life with a spear, Nkonthu was paralyzed by the pharaoh's sorcerer and mummified, but made immortal so as to suffer as a living mummy. Now, fast forward to the 20th century and the living mummy regained the ability to move again, and he clawed his way out of his slumber and terrorized Cairo until he was eventually seemingly defeated. Only not really, because he came back. The living mummy has actually acted as a hero as well. Quite a bit, honestly, helping out on many teams using his super strength, stamina, and durability, plus a form of immortality that doesn't let him die from anything except some physical attacks. Also, after being charged by Anubis, Nkonthu has apparently gained the ability to draw souls from sentient beings. Number 7. Sauron. Calling him a monster is a little unfair, but also not really. As a child, Dr. Carl Lycos was attacked by a mutated pterodon and somehow became an energy vampire, forced to absorb the life energy from animals and humans in order to survive. However, after absorbing energy from the mutant Havoc, the energy triggered his metamorphosis into a creature that resembled a half-humanoid pterodon, who retained his human intelligence and the ability to speak. However, the transformation distorted Lycos' personality, turning him evil. Hence, Lycos took the name Sauron after the arch-villain of J.R.R. Tolkien's The Lord of the Rings. He has come into many conflicts and alliances with various mutants, including the X-Men, over his history, and he eventually became conqueror of the Savage Land, which is a hidden refuge for dinosaurs nestled in the modern Antarctic. Number 6. Morbius. Yes, it is indeed Morbin time, my friends. As probably one of the most frequently occurring and now most memed Marvel monsters, Michael Morbius is a prominent figure for monsters and mystical beings in Marvel Comics. Suffering from a rare blood disease, Morbius turned to a cure that used vampire bat DNA. Now this mutated him into a blood-sucking creature of the night and a pseudo-vampire, with all the perks of vampirism minus the drawback, except for looking utterly terrifying. He was at first a villain doing battle against the likes of Spider-Man and of course Blade, but he eventually became a conflicted hero, using his abilities to help others while battling his bloodlust and trying to cure himself of his curse. Number 5. Dracula. Moving from a pseudo-vampire to the lord of all vampires. Dracula is an incredibly old vampire, sorcerer, and nobleman who became the supreme ruler of all vampires while also being the most powerful vampire of all time. The Wallachian Count Vlad turned himself into a vampire in order to face the invading Ottoman forces in the 1400s. Now, minus the abilities native to most vampires, including superhuman attributes, hypnotism, immortality, and shapeshifting, Vlad is a sorcerer, and he has even the ability to control the weather to a degree that can even oppose both Storm of the X-Men and the god Thor. Recently, he has declared the site and surrounding area of Chernobyl the Vampire Kingdom. He used this seat of power to steal the blood of Wolverine that allowed Dracula to survive in sunlight for a limited time. But he has done so much more during his long run in Marvel Comics starting in 1950. Number 4. Fing Fang Foom. being. He whose limbs shatter mountains and whose back scrapes the sun. Fin Fang Foom is a member of a race of shape-shifting aliens from a world called Kakaranthara, or if you prefer the much easier Maklu 4. Foom was the navigator of the spacecraft that landed on Earth in ancient China, and he volunteered himself to be put in a tomb in a deep slumber to serve as a backup plan for the other Makluans to conquer Earth. Fin Fang Foom looks a lot like a kind of humanized Chinese dragon when he is in his natural form, and is a massive shapeshifter from anywhere between 32 to 255 feet. As a dragon and alien, he possesses super strength, stamina, durability, and longevity, as well as telepathy and flight, spiritual possession, energy assimilation, acid mists, and potential transmogrification abilities. He has fought and allied with so many different heroes over his time, including a hilarious fight with the Hulk where he was thrown to the moon. Number 3. Zenmu. The alien cybernetic monster Zenmu is an incredibly intelligent being with a huge amount of strength and power. Introduced in Marvel Comics in 1960's Journey into Mystery, he is one of the first monsters introduced, and he even predates the Fantastic Four. Zenmu is able to cast hypnotic rays that can control the entire human population. He can use telekinesis, scatter his atoms, and even inhabit host bodies. In other words, Zenmu is incredibly powerful. Most recently, Zenmu was a foe to the Hulk in the Immortal Hulk series. He was hired by the Roxxon company to ruin the Hulk's public image by creating disasters and swooping in to save the day. Zenmu used his hypnotic powers to persuade civilians and even close friends and allies of the Hulk to turn their backs on him. Thankfully though, the Hulk managed to break free of his control, and he actually completely destroyed Zenmu. Coming in at number 2 is Man-Thing. Ted Sallis was a scientist first assigned to something called Project Sulfur, in which he created a serum that made people immune to all toxic biochemicals. But it also, unfortunately, turned them into monsters. This serum was called SO2. However, Sallis had to flee from forces who desired his formula for their own nefarious purposes. He injects himself with the serum, but after crashing in a specific swamp and dying, he is transformed into a swamp creature through a combination of this formula and magical forces existing in the area. As Man-Thing, Ted is practically invincible. He can be destroyed, but as long as there is vegetation on Earth, he grows back his body. Depending on the situation, his super strength is possibly limitless. He has fought against the Hulk, the Thing, and the entire Marvel Champions team. Man-Thing also has the ability to teleport around the Earth using Nexus points. He can breathe underwater and can't really be held captive, as he can just ooze past objects, like if you locked him behind bars, he can just walk through the bars. The last of his powers consists of detecting emotions. Positive emotions make him feel calm and reserved, but negative feelings make him go ballistic, making him secrete an ooze that can burn almost anything, including Luke Cage's skin. Man-Thing is also capable of controlling the nexus of all realities. During Fear itself, Man-Thing's power increased, releasing him from the bond to the nexus of all realities and allowing him to teleport wherever he wishes at will, and later his powers grow so great that he is able to manipulate reality. Also, Man-Thing is one of the few beings shown to be naturally immune to the Marvel Zombies plague. And in at number 1 is Jormungand. According to Norse legend, Jormungand is the son of Loki and the Jotunheim sorceress Angerboda. Realizing the danger that Jormungand posed to the gods of Asgard, Odin, the ruler of the realm of Asgard, banished Jormungand to the depths of the ocean of Earth, or Midgard. Now Jormungand not only survived in the oceans, but grew to an incredible size. At his full size, Jormungand was big enough to encircle the entire planet, and Jormungand became known as the Midgard Serpent. It was prophesied that on the day of Ragnarok, when it is said that most of the gods of Asgard will pass away, that Odin's son Thor will kill the Midgard Serpent, but Thor himself would die as a result of the Midgard Serpent's venom. So, we know the Midgard Serpent's venom can kill Asgardian gods, but by compressing his coils around the planet, he could also magically cause storms, earthquakes, and other disasters. He was also usually in an ethereal form, making him invisible and intangible to humans, but if he came out of this form fully, he would destroy a lot of stuff on Earth. So it's kinda good that he stays that way. In battles he has had with Thor, only a part of him ceased to be ethereal, and that one part was absolutely massive. Becoming visible also froze time while he and Thor battled. Thor and beings as strong as him are the only ones capable of defeating the serpent, but Thor is the only one to have actually done it.